O great Creator, limitless, eternal, light of lights, elevate us here into an awareness and experience of your presence and your spirit of wholeness, the Holy Spirit. That we may know that peace which passes all understanding, and that in that peace we may discover our connection with the all. And through that connection, light, life, and love can flow and touch and heal and raise. We ask and accept this in the names and presence of our most Holy Mother Mary and of our Lord, the Master Christ Jesus. Glory unto God, glory unto the Christ, and glory unto the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. So I wanted to read a couple verses, 3 actually, from the 4th chapter of Mark, beginning with verse 21. And he said unto them, Is a candle brought to be put under a bushel or under a bed, and not to be set on a candlestick? For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested, neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And coincidentally, or not, because I don't really believe in coincidence anymore, I happened across this Rumi quote that I copied so I wouldn't forget the exact way it was put. I happen to like Rumi, so I get my daily dose of Rumi. In a night full of pain and darkness, be a candle, spreading light until dawn. In a night full of pain and darkness, be a candle, spreading light until dawn. Okay, so here we go. The moment that we step out on the way and open ourselves to the influx of the living light of the Christ, things begin to rumble and get dislodged and change in us, right? And we let go as we're going through these various cleansing processes. And there's physical cleansings that happen, and there's mental and emotional cleansings that can happen, and there's joy that can happen, and it's this process that takes us through all these realms, and how that starts, this business about first stepping out on the way, is a whole other discussion we've had before, and we will undoubtedly have many times. What is it that happens in a person when they are at that point, when they say, I am ready to give it all? It's all or nothing at this point for me. I'm all in on this. Not dabbling, I'm not playing at it. And so that light comes in, and we're elevated and we're destroyed, and we're healed and we're destroyed, and we go through this process because the rug is continually pulled out from under us. We establish a new foundation, and woof, out it comes again, and we go through this topsy-turvy, and we're going to continue that ad infinitum, right? That's something to get used to. It's not a sorrowful thing. It's only sorrowful when we're identified with the foundation that we built and our solid ground of being that we have developed, our concepts and our opinions and our self-image and our worldviews and all of that. It has to go and go again because we're really good at recreating those things like that fast. That's why Jesus would, say, he'd heal somebody and say, now go forth and sin no more, right? And the sin is in our recreation of that which is not infinite and eternal. It's finite by definition. We've created it, right? And so that's all that sin is. I like the word sin, S-I-N, in Spanish. Sin, S-I-N, means without, and I mean that's everything. It's like it's life without the Creator. It's life without light and spirit and joy and peace and all the things that come with truly following the way. Okay. In the same way that evil is lived backwards, or devil is one who has lived backwards. All right, little word games, but I find that there's some truth in those little words too. Okay. So if that's happening to us individually, when we're going through the process of following the way, and we know that the light is coming into the planet in increasing waves and intensity now. It has been. It's not like somebody just recently flipped a switch, but it's happening, and it's intensifying, and those who have been sensitized to that feel it and are aware of it and see it in their own meditations and their own spiritual practice, and see it around them. We see more and more people who are lighting up, people that never have meditated a day in their life, that don't have a spiritual practice per se. And if you suggested that they get one, would be offended because I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, and spiritual means my idea of spiritual, not yours, right? And that's all good, it's happening. Right? But if that's happening in each one of us, and that intensifying light bubbles things up like that, how much more is that magnified when we look at the 7 billion people on the planet? Okay, so if you walk into a room and everybody's bummed out about something, and you just walked in off the street and you're all happy and you walked in, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Whoa, what is going on in this room? Everybody's bummed out about something. They just heard the worst possible news or whatever it is, Or conversely, you walk in, maybe you're not happy, and you walk into the room and everybody's just off the wall, insanely joyful for some reason that you aren't aware of, but it's infectious, and now you're feeling better, right? You get swept along with it. Imagine that room magnified by 7 billion people, the intensity of that. The problem is that we don't have a good metric by which we can compare and contrast. It's not like we can say, I'm stepping in off the street into this room. We're already in the room. we've already, and we just don't know what the temperature of it is, emotionally and mentally and spiritually. We're too close to it, right? Okay. And so we find that, I don't want to put a percentage on this, but a lot of what we feel and think and experience isn't coming from us. It's coming from this room that we're in, the collective consciousness of the 7 billion people. And so if we experience anxiety and fear and depression, where's that coming from? Is it yours? Medicated for? You know, maybe. I'm not saying you shouldn't get medicated. Somebody's going to write me a letter about that. But even knowing how that works, why a medication might help in that, is really insightful. Okay. And so we're bombarded continually by all these things that are coming up, not just everybody randomly running around doing their crazy things in their normal way that they've been doing it semi-asleep for millennia, but now that flame is being turned up on the burner underneath this boiling pot, and things are getting more intense, and the reactions are stronger, and the insanity is magnified, and the joy and the potentials are also magnified, but it's all happening, right? And so we see people around us, and we may feel it ourselves, where we're bouncing off the walls. We don't have control. We're losing grip on how to navigate. We've got a hand on the tiller of this little boat, and it's not gaining traction anymore. You know, it's not enough. We need a deeper keel, and okay. And so I see, as things intensify in current events, people getting depressed and anxious and worried about upcoming elections, or about, you know, what's happening with neighboring countries and the development of nuclear arms, and wherever this place, that place, or the other is, and all these things, right? And, you know, there's articles running around now that you can read about how people are experiencing real anxiety and depression over what's going to happen in a few days now, which is the election, right? People, I mean, it's an actual syndrome they're identifying. But to me, that's just like a prime example of what's happening universally throughout the planet. That's why we get to see these things. We're a little dull and not very bright, and so we need to have an object lesson periodically to say, oh, that's intense. Yeah, well, yeah, that's intense, and look how goofy this is, and how out of control and insane that is, and how divisive this is, and guess what? It's not just that. It's everywhere. We've done this. We're living in the soup, this miasma of all of that, and have been, and it's intensifying. All of that's intensifying. And so now tell me how you're feeling. And you say, well, I can't, you know, I can only tell you, you know. People don't know where their feelings and emotions and thoughts are coming from. Okay. And so when I said that, it's because they don't have anything to compare and contrast against. That's really the key, right? We don't know what it feels like to be us, absent all that other input. The number of people that have ever traversed this planet and knew what it actually felt like to be authentic, meaning stripped away from all that external, no input, just the output of self and the soul personality. Darn few have done that. We get lost in the chatter and the noise and the energy of life on Earth, which is a wonderful thing because it gives us an awesome opportunity to find our way, when we do, to that place of authenticity and self-discovery, self-realization, and then the contrast is so remarkable, there's no doubt about it anymore, right? So when Jesus and Rumi are talking about being a candle, right, and not hiding that candlelight, letting the God being that is in us, that is us, shine, we're ultimately saying, find that candle first. You know, you gotta know yourself to be the flame. Right? And so we were talking a little earlier about, well, we don't need to have reached the end of the road, this goal of spiritual magnificence. In order to be servants, we can roll up our sleeves and wade right in and need to do that, so that spirit is moving. It's the movement of the spirit that primes the pump, that makes the light active in this world. Okay. We have to engage the world and be active in it, and that light moves through us. But we have to remember who we are. And it's a million times a day we have to remember who we are. Because there's 7 billion people telling you who you are. And none of them know. They all got it wrong. Right? No wonder people are worried and anxious and depressed and uptight and all that. You know? So, one of my favorite visuals is Alice in Wonderland, and Alice comes to this magnificent mushroom with a caterpillar sitting on top smoking a hookah, and he looks down on her and says, "Who are you?" And that's the question. That's like Ramana Maharshi in caterpillar form or something. Who are you? That's what we ask ourselves, you know. Who am I? And then drill down a little deeper, you know. Who just asked that question? And then who's observing me, asking myself who asked that question, and so on. And with that, people would continually go to Sri Ramana Maharshi and say, Well, those are the exact words that I need to use. And after I say it that way, how many times do I need to say it again and you know, keep drilling down? And you could just see him rolling his eyes in whatever way he would, I guess, and say, no, it's not the words. It's not, you don't say it out loud. You don't have to say it in your head, really, even. It's the idea of inquiry, right? That question, it's a state of being, you know, right? So it's that process that is the yeast, the leaven that is hid in the 3 measures of meal that the Bible talks about. That's what we become then. We become that. We're the vehicle through which that leaven, that yeast is inserted into the lumps of dough around us. And those lumps of dough begin to rise and become authentic, right? Right. So there's a difference between not waiting until you're some finished product, as an ideal that you have of what the finished product spiritually is going to be like for you. That you don't have to wait until you start serving, helping, healing. There's a difference between that and going off half-cocked. You know, that term means half-cocked. You know, back in the days of the muzzle-loading rifles, you had literally half-cock your rifle to carry it around, so it's like a safety. But when it came to push-come-shove time, you'd have to fully cock the thing, and then you could pull the trigger, right? Don't ask me how I know that. At any rate, you don't want to ever go off half-cocked, because nothing happens then, and you're in over your head, and that's what I'm kind of addressing here, I guess, is that although you don't need to wait until you're the finished product and before you start serving and helping and healing, you want to know what it is that you can do. What arenas can you work in? What tools have you been given? Right? So right now, everybody that has taken 10 or more yoga classes at the local YMCA hangs their own shingle and says, I'm a guru, because I know how to do a lotus position and I can chant the Om, all right? And I'm going to tell you now how to be better people. Sorry, all you yoga teachers out there. The internet is replete with such examples, right? And everybody's got something to say, and there's some really nicely packaged presentations about things, and maybe they help, maybe they do help, but you've got to be really careful, because you don't want to become inauthentic. You don't want to teach things that you don't know. You don't want to not, and by knowing I mean having had the experience of, not learned it, right? So, and so we find what our arena is in which we're going to serve today, where I'm at now, and start working there, right? the person that's sitting next to you at work or on the bus or whatever it is, practicing what it feels like to be that candle set on a candlestick, what it actually feels like to be a channel through which that moves silently, with words added on, with hugs and gestures, and however it comes through, just to feel that and get confidence and familiarity with it. That simple step will pave the way for all future steps. And with each of those steps comes the discovery of how it is that you are to serve today, now, this lifetime, you know. Okay. Any questions?
Well, one of the things I'm really curious about, because of my work, I think, is that idea that a lot of the depression and anxiety that people carry is actually not theirs. And as a therapist, when you're working with people, you can oftentimes get at the root of that in themselves. And I wonder if there's a way to distinguish, or does it matter?
No. Yeah, so that's where the art, you get the science and the art, and this is where the art of the counseling comes in, is that there's no one size fits all, as you know, right? You're feeling what's happening with that person, where they're at, what awareness and consciousness they have of themselves beyond being a body, you know. So it's really limiting when somebody is, their image of themselves, their understanding of who they are, is this body, and so consequently everything that they are experiencing, every pain, be it physical or emotional, is a physiological kind of thing, you know. The brain chemistry is off, or the, you know, all that. And then there's, you know, those who might be self-aware enough to be able to start listening to their internal dialogue and how they talk to themselves and how they start looping the kinds of things that come their way. And then you can talk to them later about where those things came from initially, because it really doesn't matter. You're still going to deal with it in the same way regardless. You know, they think that it's coming up from within them, and they might think that it's coming up from within them because their mother was mean to them when they were growing up or whatever. But it's...
there becomes an identification.
Yeah, and there are, I don't want to, you know, diminish the reality that there are experiences that we have that set up patterns all by themselves in our lives. What that does, though, is it sets up a resonant frequency in the individual, like a crystal that has a resonant frequency, and that resonance draws to itself every other experience, every other feeling and emotion that is harmonious with that resonant frequency, you know. So at some point, yeah, we can say it's important to see what it was that may have triggered that initial thing in the first place, but ultimately you're going to deal with the whole thing, the core seminal oscillating frequency, and all of the ancillary spin-off harmonics that have been drawn to you. You're going to deal with them in the same way, and that is to understand that they aren't you. None of those. Yeah. So good luck, because that's a tough nut to crack. No pun intended. It's a bad thing to say to a therapist. So. The people that are able to advance with all this are the people who can see that internal dialogue and how it's working. When they get to see it, and then they go, "Oh, I got to let go of that. That's self-destructive," you know. Yeah, people right now are saying, "Man, I'm so tired of all this election stuff. I can't wait till it's over." And I'm going, "Yeah, okay, I get that. I understand. You know, the ads will go away on TV." But nothing's going away. It's coming out. Everything's coming out and up, and it's more important than ever that those of us who are dedicating themselves to serving can be grounded enough in who they are and who we are as infinite and eternal beings of light, life, and love, that all of the insanity that is around us all the time can't stick. We no longer have that resonant frequency in us that will allow it to. Right? Why? Because perfect love casts out fear, Jesus said, right? Perfect love casts out fear. The opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is fear. And one is expansive and the other is constricting. It contracts on itself. And so when we're afraid, it's because we are now turning our gaze back in on ourselves, not in the good way, in the way that is self-destructive. And all of a sudden, our whole energy and auric field and everything just starts to collapse in on itself, like a star going nova, you know, just, and it crushes down to maybe a pulse star and then maybe a black hole, and you know, and everything gets sucked into it, and that's kind of what we find people doing. And somebody said that being anxious is actually praying for the outcome that you would least like to have happen, right? I really like that, you know. The anxiety, being fearful, fretful, worried, achieves less than nothing, right? And as a matter of fact, will draw to us the very things that we're most afraid of. We teach that thoughts are prayers. Every thought is a prayer, right? Some of the strongest prayers that we have are those unconscious thoughts. And of those, some of the strongest are our fears. right? And so it's important for us to let go of our attachments and of our fears, the things that we like. We say, I have to be unattached to life, and unattached to material things, and unattached to whatever we think we need to let go of and be unattached to, and we look at that as things that are good. I really have this desire for this candy, you know, whatever that candy is. And that's what I have to let go of. But what we also have to let go of is our fears. I'm afraid of living under a bridge. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of being my lover walking out on me. I'm afraid whatever it is. And those are they're more insidious, because we don't see them as desires. I'm letting go of my desires, but those fears are powerful. And so when Jesus said, resist not evil, that's really what we're talking about here, is that we've got these, we're being bombarded continually, you know, that we're being told that we're justified in being afraid. We're being encouraged to be afraid by all different ways, right? And instead of running with that, we can, or fighting with it. That's the other thing. When we start to become aware of that, we'll start to say, no, and I want to build a blockade. Okay. And we put up this energetic field that's going to keep those things at bay. I've done it. I know what that's like. You going into dangerous situations. You know, we used to go out on street patrols and would go out into, you know, every night and go out into different areas of the city that we were in, whatever cities that we were in, and I mean, there were crazy, insane things going on there. Dangerous things. Cops would be going by in their squad cars, 5 cops in a car, and roll down the window and say, "Hey, Father," we look like priests, right? He said, "Hey, Father, get out of here." So, what are you guys, nuts? Right? And I know what that feels like, where you say, I'm willing to walk and wear the light like a suit of armor. Okay? And that's funny, because it does work like that. The light does work like a suit of armor. There are things but it's not because it's resistive to things. It's because it will, it reminds me of the magnetosphere of the planet. Okay, so we've got this magnetic sheath around the planet. And when the solar winds come to the planet, and they're filled with billions of tons of charged particles, right? And if that solar wind were to come and hit the Earth unimpeded, good night time, right? But it hits the magnetosphere, and the magnetosphere just takes it and wraps it around and sends it out behind it. So you look at the way that is portrayed, and you've got the leading edge of the solar wind hitting the magnetosphere, and then it comes out, and then you've got this trailing energy field. And sometimes there's enough of an impact, or the intensity is enough to cause a little fissure in the magnetosphere, and some of those charged particles will get in, and that's what we experience as the auroras, right? They begin to ionize oxygen and nitrogen, and then it makes colors. But It's a fantastic thing, and that's kind of the way it feels then when you're walking. Then the magnetosphere is like this aura of light that you carry with you, and things, whatever it is that's coming your way, is just like that. You're not resisting it. You're not giving it something to beat it against. You know, the moment that we try to resist it, we're giving it life. We are giving it, we're saying this is a valid force in the universe. And it isn't. It's a fictitious force in the universe, right? Evil, fear, worry, anxiety, all those things that seem to be these very powerful, destructive forces are not real. They don't have inherent intrinsic reality. And so another way I've looked at it is like, you know, the martial artists, in particular a judo expert, you know, their whole thing is not to attack, they're not fighting, they're not resisting, they're just redirecting. You know, they're not going to resist that thrown punch, you know. But the very energy of the thrown punch itself becomes the undoing of it, its own undoing. Or we can stick our face in the way and block it. So. So when we talk about workers in the vineyard, people who are entering into what has been called the great work, this is what we're talking about, is the people that are committing themselves to the process of transformation, that are committing themselves to the way of awakening and following that quest for the discovery of authenticity, of who they really are, absent all external stimuli. And then to be as true as they can to that core of authentic self, and to share that, and to listen to it, and to obey it, because it's always there, you know. And at first it's very much like that. As much as we talk about, well, you know, this is the path of Vedanta, the oneness, non-duality, you know. When we're here and we're discovering this, it's very much of a dualistic kind of a thing. I am on a path. I am following it. I am going somewhere. I am becoming more authentic. I am listening to this higher self. I am listening to this higher self and being obedient to it. So who is the I in that, and who's the higher self? But that's where we start out with, and so we work with that. That's the vow of obedience, is to be able to listen and obey to that. And so we find ourselves literally and figuratively standing at the threshold of an inner chamber in which we behold our own being. Okay. And we look at that and go, oh my God, that's who I am. I'm not anything else. That's who I am. And we worship it because we know that what we're beholding is divine. It's the burning bush on the mountain, right? But that's not the totality of the realization. That's the beginnings of it, right? at some point we enter that chamber in which we were standing on the threshold. We actually enter it and allow the inexorable gravitational pull of our own being, that which we behold at the core, at the center of everything, that inexorable pull to draw us home. And then we're no longer standing on the circumference of that circle. We're no longer standing outside looking in. There is no longer any outside or in. There is no longer me looking at something. There is no longer something other than itself. And then we're talking about the kind of self-realization, or God, what we would call God realization, that is more akin to what you find in Eastern teachings. We use the term self-realization in a way that a lot of Eastern teachings wouldn't understand. They wouldn't. That's not how they would work with it. You know. That other experience is also that experience that I'm talking about, of that inexorable pull and allowing ourselves to be reunited, the mystic marriage, that's another way of calling it, the mystic marriage happens, is gnosis. That's the whole idea behind Gnosticism in the purest form of that. Is that you've had this experience of your bonding with, your oneness with all that is, and you're not doing what we normally do, and that is analyze and critique. You know, so see, so that whole process of finding that light within, finding that door into that inner chamber because you have the light enough to seek with, and seeing and discovering that being, that whole process is what enables you to be effective servants. You don't need to be the ultimate finished product, whatever that is. You merely need to be engaged in that process, and then everything moves through you, because that allows you then to have that compare and contrast, where you say, okay, I know that I'm in this room with 7 billion people, but I also know who I am, and I'm not being fooled or hypnotized into thinking that I'm something other. Yeah. Okay. And so we ask and accept. That the great light, this living light, the essence of all that is, of all matter and of all spirit, that well up within the hearts and minds of every person on this planet. Let that cleansing increase. Let the joy and the suffering and the pain and anguish and the illumination and the totality of the embracing of life, let it happen. For we know that the all good is all that exists. guide us that we might be effective as channels of that living light in this world. Amen.